if you should apply for a given grant or not. Is it a good bet for you? You should also be able to describe and avoid the common mistakes that are made in writing a proposal. There are some mistakes that are just ubiquitous. Lots of people make the mistakes. So that's something you should be able to avoid, hopefully after this. It's always important to know how the selection process works. Different grants, even within USDA, different grants have different selection processes. So you really need to know how you're going to be determined, right? How people are going to determine the value of your grant, what you have written. And then finally, you need to know the SARE selection process. How does SARE go through things and decide who gets the money and who doesn't? So those are the things that I really hope you can walk out of here with. So if you have any questions at any point, you can either put something in the chat box or just use the little icon that lets you raise your hand, right? So feel free to do that. So who gives away money? Well, it's rather, you're going to have a lot of opportunities across your career to get money. Government agencies, state, federal, local, all provide various forms of grants. So those are always a place to look. Foundations, private foundations, and what I call the semi-private foundations, sort of have one foot in the public sphere and one foot in the private sphere. Foundations are very important donors because they have certain things they're trying to accomplish, and these things are usually pretty big, pretty long-term things they're trying to accomplish. So foundations are a good place to look for money. But I would say writing a grant for a foundation as your first grant is probably not a good idea. Corporations actually offer grants. Often they are limited to goods and employee time. They'll give you goods like the kind of thing they sell or they make, they will give to you. And they will actually encourage their employees and even pay their employees to go out and do some volunteer work. So don't turn away just because it's a corporation. Kellogg Company does a lot of grants. So do several other of the major. Walmart does grants. So you got to be very picky when you look. You need to cast a wide net because there are lots of organizations and people out there giving grants. And what's interesting is that they all operate pretty much the same way. There's not that much difference in how a private sector donor and a public sector donor operate. And certainly not much difference in why they give away money and how they decide who to give it to. So federal agencies, state agencies are just one of the places where you can get money. And so why do people and organizations then give grants? Well, there's three ways to think about that. One way is to support individual development. There are a very large number of organizations that give money to support the individual development of people. Like, for example, when I was a brand new student, college student, Kellogg, no, it wasn't Kellogg, what was it? A grocery store gave me a little grant for my first year of study at the university. I don't know why, but they did. But that's individual development. That's the kinds of grants that focus on allowing individuals to develop. A step up, so to speak, certainly in terms of funding, is to build the capacity of institutions, institutional development. So Boys and Girls Club of America, right? For example, they get grants and that permits them to continue to run their programs. So building institutional capacity is a major grant activity. And then the third one, and the reason that one's in bold and big letters is because by far the vast majority of grants are given because the donor has goals that they want to accomplish. And these goals are important to them and important to their company or their organization or their community. They want to achieve those goals. And so really, that's one thing I want you to take home from this is that first and foremost, your task in writing a proposal is to help the donor achieve their goals. That's what it's all about. That's why they're giving you the money, because they want you to be able to help them achieve their goals. So any questions so far? This is sort of a take on why people give away money. Okay, I don't see any hands up or anything. Do you, Brian? No, okay. So my first thing about writing grant proposals, now that we know that you're going to be working for the donor, right? You're trying to achieve the donor's goals. One thing I say is you should never ask strangers for money, right? It's like your mama told you, don't ask strangers for money. So why am I saying that? You say, why would you put that here? Because one of your first tasks in writing a grant proposal is to learn about the donor. It's really important that you learn about the donor, what they do, what they want to do, what their objectives are, what they funded before, who they worked with before, what kinds of organizations do they deal with. You really need to know how that donor operates. So you really, it takes time and effort to look that stuff up. But it's important because otherwise you can end up writing something that is just not of interest at all to the donor. So you got to learn about the donor and specifically, what are the goals, objectives, and priorities of the donor? And what are they trying to accomplish? That's really critical for you to know. So if you think about SARE and what you've read so far. I presume you've looked at least at the announcement, right? What is SARE trying to accomplish? Think about that. What are they trying to accomplish? If you write a proposal that fails to reflect what the donor wants, I can just about guarantee you they're not going to fund it. From their perspective, it becomes a waste of time and money, right? So they just don't do it. Goal number two, key number two is there is no generic proposal. I have had students and other people, non-students, faculty members come around and they clearly haven't really read the RFP, that request for proposals, right? They haven't read that document in detail. So you have to read that thing literally word for word. And we'll take a look at the RFA, the RFP, that's request for proposal. Sometimes it's called RFA, request for assistance. You really have to read it and understand exactly what they want. I say mark it up, make notes, think about what it says, know that document like you're cramming for an exam, right? Back in undergrad days. And provide the exact information that the donor needs. No more, no less. Be very explicit that you are providing exactly what they want to know. No creative writing, please. Proposal writing is like a short essay exam, not creative writing. So you do not just sit down and start to write, spinning out beautiful prose, you know. You don't do that. You prepare and you study and you get ready and then you write. So really and honestly, in grants, probably 2/3 of the work you do is done before you even try to write it. Honestly, it takes a lot of prepping before you're ready to write a proposal. And it is more like a short essay exam than it is a creative writing process, right? You know, you need to study and be ready and know what you're talking about. Key number 3 is your project should solve the real needs of real people in the real world. Here's the one I run into all the time, and this is going to sound ugly, but it's true. I have read so many proposals. I've reviewed a lot of proposals. I review for USDA, I review for other national organizations, all sorts of things. I've reviewed proposals. And often what I find is that the person writing the proposal is really focusing on what they want to do, not what the donor wants. So put another way, you know, as I put it, the fact that you don't have the money to do what you want to do is not a problem from the donor's perspective. They don't care. They care about what they want to do. And that's true whether it's a federal agency or a private company or whoever giving out that money. They're giving you money because they have specific things they want you to accomplish for them. So I always think of writing a proposal. I think of a proposal just like a bid to get a company to do something, right? You go out and you say, hey, I want this, 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 and this. Can you do that for me? And there'll be a bunch of people that line up and somebody's going to win and say, yeah, I can do that. And they're going to convince that person that they're the best person to do that job. It's the same way in grants. Donors look at it and they say, huh, how well does this align with what we want? Not a problem. If you have a problem, and I have seen people turn in proposals that did not have one word in them about the actual goals of the donor. They clearly hardly ever read it. They just don't even take it into account. So you really have to focus on what the donor wants. And people, I think, organizations, the environment, they do matter. The day is gone when all you had to do to get a grant was to show that you knew your science, that you knew what you were doing, right? So they were like, oh, good, this person really has a good background in X, or this person has done this before. That doesn't get you very far these days. So they really want to know how you're going to address the needs of, say, underserved populations in detail, naming names and organizations. Say that's who you're trying to focus on, is underserved populations. Well, then you have to name names and organizations. You can't just have vague statements. You also have to be able to explain how your science is going to improve the quality of life for communities and families. That's absolutely critical to SARE. All SARE grants have this as a primary priority, improving the quality of life. So that is something that you must think about and figure out how you're going to improve the quality of life. And another thing for SARE is, of course, that we want food systems to be very sustainable. So that you have to address. So you have 3 things there that you just need to start your proposal with, right? How are you going to address the needs of underserved people? This is a huge thing in SARE. So how are you going to do that? Name names, name organizations. How are you going to improve the quality of life? What's it going to look like after your grant is completed and you've done the work? What's the difference going to be? And then how are you going to help maintain the food system? So those are really critical things in SARE. So you got to state goals very clearly, and then objectives and outcomes that, if achieved, will help solve the problems that you want to solve, right? So I want to sort of get you to think about this. Goals are a broad conceptual statement. It's the big picture, right? So almost all grant proposals start out with some sort of goal. Goal of our project is to. Outputs now start to get tougher, because those are things that people will do differently as a result of your project. It's a change in behavior. And getting changes in behavior, for those of you who've worked in that, know that that's very difficult, right? People do not change their behavior easily. But that's the output of a good grant. You actually get people to change their behavior. And then the really big piece is outcomes. And that's the effect of the changes on behavior that you identified. It's that you change something in the real world, in the lives of people. So people change their behavior, but the change in behavior actually had the desired impact on those people that you wanted to achieve. So that's 3 words that are really important in writing goals, and you got to realize that they are critical. You have to include them. Any questions about the differences between those? Okay. So key number 5 is, this is the project narrative or a description that explains your approach, how you're going to accomplish all this. And it has to be something that convinces the donor that it will work. So you have to think about how the activities that you propose, that's what you ask money for. You ask money for activities, to fund activities. So when you do that, you have to stop and think about the activities you propose, because they have to lead to those outcomes, outputs, and goals that you say you want to achieve. Can't just sort of be random activities. They got to be things that help people solve the problems you identified. And it's really critical that you justify your approach. There are lots of different ways to do things. You need to justify how you're going to do things. Number 6, evidence that you have the right organizations and the right people to get the job done. That is one of the more difficult parts of this. You have to have the right expertise and the right equipment to do something. You have to have the right people on board. For example, one of the things we're going to look at in a student grant is your advisor. Who is your advisor? Who's advising you and mentoring you in this process? And do they have the knowledge and the experience needed for your project to be successful? Can they mentor you well? How do you and your partners complement each other? Right? If you have a couple of organizations working with you, well, what does each one do, and how come you need 2, right? How do they work? What are the different roles these organizations have? And you can say the same for people. Do you have the right people on board, and do they cover the breadth of expertise that's needed? And then a big one is, where are the lines of responsibility? And they're going to ask you for that explicitly in most grant proposals. Who's sort of running the show, so to speak? And then number 7 is important, really important. Success means changes as a result of your project. That's really the definition of success. So you need to explain in your proposal how you're going to know if the project worked, if it accomplished what it meant to accomplish, if it changed something. In other words, if an outcome occurred. Things like head counts, not very important. They don't count for much. So what? So 50 people came to a meeting. If nobody did anything different, not much effort, right? Not much help. Same thing, by the way, for a wonderful yield on an experimental plot. That doesn't show you that people are going to change their practices. But if you get an increase in income per acre for farmers who adopted your innovation, now you have something that counts. So think hard about what counts for people. Farmers would be happy to have a better yield, but what they really want is the income, right? And then finally, the budget. Every item in the budget has to be tied directly to an activity or a deliverable, and they all have to be needed to make the project work. That's what a donor is looking for. So when you think about your budget, it has to include all of the costs you're going to incur to get the project done. In student grants, often those are travel, right? Materials, supplies, stuff like that. You got to have enough money for that. You got to base your budget on a bottom-up approach, not guesstimates. I mean, when I see one of these proposals that comes in and it has a grant budget that's like, oh, let's say that the top amount, biggest amount of money you can get for the grant is $50,000. Okay. And I come in as a reviewer and I look and I say, wow, this person really must have done it just right because they have a budget of exactly $50,000. That's not the way it works. I look at that and I don't believe it. I say, you saw that the maximum amount of money you could get was $50,000, so you made sure that you created a budget that accounted for $50,000. Build it from the ground up. Actually built on what you really need to get the project done so that there's no guesstimates and it's not too high or too low. By the way, you can have a budget that's too low that an experienced person will look at and say, that's not enough money to do what they want to do. So think about that. Budget is, I hate putting budgets together. I freely admit it. So it's no fun, folks. But get the right numbers because people who work in these areas all the time, they know how much stuff costs. I saw one of the worst low budgets I ever saw was I had been doing a lot of making videos and videos that were shot in the field. So you have a camera crew out there and all that sort of stuff, right? It's expensive to do that. You know, to get a whole camera crew and everything else and make high-end videos. And a grant proposal came in on a project for a program that I was looking at, reviewing for. And they said they were going to produce something like 6 or 7 of these really high quality videos for like $5,000. I'm like, that is impossible. That is not going to happen. So didn't impress me. So that's the end of my comments. Anybody got questions? Hi. Perseverance?
Yes, yes. Good morning, and thank you for your presentation. I have a question on the budget items. For example, I'm planning to submit a proposal, but I have the lab supply for part of the activities and what would cost. For example, we have an analyzer in the lab to analyze a part of the samples, but then we would need the other samples to be analyzed in the lab. So to put that in a realistic way in the budget, in a way that is convincing, but not so scary that, oh, you don't have enough money to run this is not enough money for you to run this project. So how do I make it clear that that's like a combined effort between the lab and what I am requesting the donor to fund for my project?
Okay, so you're saying you're just going to be asking only for the money for your part of the project?
Yes.
Say it just like that. Say that who's providing the rest of the money?
It's the lab. I have another project is already, the lab is well equipped with supplies and everything else that is required for fraction. And then I would need additional funding for in order to be able to cover the magnitude of the project, let's say.
I would say it exactly like you just did. I've got enough money to do most of this, but not all of it.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, yeah. Anybody else? I'm flicking through here to see if I see anybody. No other questions or comments?
So I just have a question about describing how our project contribute to the underserved population. So my research, it plans to collect data from different types of farmers, but not exactly underserved farmers. So how do I frame that in my research proposal?
Okay, yeah, that was my example, was underserved farmers. That it doesn't have to be, you just have to be explicit about describing the population you want to work with. Donors really want to know that, like, and it could be, it could be large scale farmers.
Mhm.
It could be whatever, but you need to describe it and be clear about that. SARE does tend to focus more on small farms. That's part of what was written in the original legal legislation that established the program. So that does tend to be, where they're more interested, or family farms. But family farms can be, hundreds of acres, right? So it's, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, thank you.
I see somebody else up here.
Yes, hello, thank you for the presentation. I want to ask you about if I am eligible as an international student. I have been already admitted to the UFL and I will start my PhD on July 2023. Based on the SARE guidelines, am I considered as enrolled? Because it says in the guidelines that by the time of the submission of the application, I should be enrolled to the department.
Oh, yeah, I see what you're saying. Good question. So you're saying you would be applying for the grant before you're actually enrolled in the department?
Exactly, but I have been admitted, I have been hired, my assistantship, everything has been taken care of.
Okay, I don't know the answer to that. And I don't know if the person who would know it left or not. Hang on a sec. Don't think I've ever run again up on that one before. I don't know. I'll have to find out the answer to that. Can you make a note, Brian, that we need to look that up?
Yeah,
Yes,
we have an
I
email
could,
chain.
I could follow up
Sorry.
with an email, yes.
Yeah, we'll work on it.
Okay, thank you. Who else we got up here? John Harling?
Yes, good morning. Thank you for the presentation. I had a question about the underserved communities example as well. So since it's the SARE grant, I guess ideally we'd be focusing on underserved communities in the southern regions. If our research could, like maybe the research has an international aspect in another area of the world that it serves underserved communities somewhere else, but then also could serve here in the southeast. Does it benefit us at all to mention that aspect, or should we just focus in on the only ways it applies specifically in the South?
I would say the latter. Focus in and say just here, southern region, this is money that comes specifically to the southern region, and there is a specific, you can't have international components.
Okay.
Yeah. Anybody else?
Hey, Mickey, just real quick. I just sent our website link in the chat if you guys wanted to check it out. It's new, just started this year. We're still working on uploading a few things to it. So if you ever want to catch up on events or other items, projects that we're working on, that's where you can find the most updated information.
Okay. Can everybody see that?
Yes.
Yeah, good. Okay. Okay,
Can I just ask something here quickly?
sure.
Okay, I just want to know, during your presentation, you did say something about trying not to be too scientific. So I just want to know what language structure would you recommend? Like, should it be like more of a scientific kind of proposal writing, or we should use a simple English like we write EDs, the ones that even farmers can really understand? And what would you like also recommend as, the range of the length of what like the proposal should be? Like, is there too much of writing or on the writing, stuff like that? Okay.
Yeah.
Um,
I hear you loud and clear. I think that there is a good spot for writing in which you write very clearly. And it is scientific. You use the scientific terms and you express the scientific ideas, but you do it in active voice. One of the things that really gets people, that is difficult for people to understand, is stuff that is written in the passive voice, like data were collected, right? So you want to, and you should, I always write, we will, not, something will be done, but we will do this. We will plant 10 acres of soybeans. We will support travel for 15 people. Just be very straightforward, keep it simple, because you've got people from every different discipline that end up reviewing these proposals. It's a widespread. The ones in SARE are more limited, not quite as widespread, but when you're writing for these national organizations and stuff, hey, you can have people in there that come from every single different discipline. So it's better just to write in plain English, but use your scientific terms, but express them in a very straightforward way. Does that make sense to you, what I'm saying?
yes.
Yeah.
And how about the length? Like, what's the length of the proposal? Like, how much can it be in terms of pages? Because oftentimes we've seen where they say, oh, this proposal is too much, or there's so much weddings, or oh, it's too little, like you didn't probably research enough. So what range would you say is probably appropriate?
Yeah, I can sort of tell you that what, in general, almost every donor anymore does limit pages or word count. They just say so much and no more. And I'll tell you, as somebody who reviews these trainings, these grants all the time, yeah, I'm for that. Keep it limited, right? But when you look at for SARE, one thing I think that people sometimes miss on is really the donor is giving you big clues about what's really critical in that proposal when they tell you how many words you can have. So if you look at SARE proposals, and we'll look at the RFA in a minute, the detailed RFA, you look at that, you'll see that sometimes they say, well, you can have 1,000 words to write about this, okay? For example, 1,000 words to write about how your project is going to improve the sustainability of farms in the southern region. 1,000 words for that. But you look at something else and it's 500 words or 300 words. They're giving you a strong clue about what's really critical, right? Where they really want to see the detail and where they really want to know what you're going to do. So take word count seriously. And I would say do not go over the word count, but I would also say if they're giving you 1,000 words, and I saw a bunch of these just recently on another grant I was reviewing for USDA, there was a pretty liberal word limit on part of the grant, and I was looking at this, it was to define the problem. And so I looked at it and people were turning in things with like, let's say they gave them 1,000 words and they were turning in something that had 200 words, 250 words. I'm like, okay, not enough, to be quite honest, right? They wanted more. They wanted more detail. So take a look at that word count. It really matters. Does that
Thank you.
help?
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, perseverance.
Yeah, just to add to what you said, I would recommend to Ken to go and watch the presentation from last week because that was stated there on how to balance the word count and also how to manage your references and actually I found that information very useful because she said graduate students tend to add a lot of references and there's not enough space in the SARE proposal grant to accommodate all the references. So there is some guideline on that presentation how to do that.
That's the do-don't list, I call it.
Yeah. Yes.
Thank you. I'll check that out.
Yeah, everybody should take a look at that recording from last week because it's full of all sorts of detailed information like that.
Where can we find that recording?
How did they get it, Brian? The recording?
I'm gonna try to find it myself, and then I have a list of the attendees. I can send it out.
Okay. So we'll do that. Anything else? Oh.
So this is a hypothetical case where a friend of mine actually experienced that and shared it with me. This is for a proposal for corporations, right?
Mhm.
And when during your presentation, I kind of recalled that, and I felt like, okay, maybe I should just ask to clarify. Like, yeah, you said, your target should be focus should be on what the donors want, what is their goal, what's their interest, right? And then again, you said we should also try to focus on the people, the real people, the the environment and all. Now we know in this present time, some companies don't really care about the environment, but they have money to fund, some research, several research, right? And maybe your research is trying to do something which is probably gonna save the environment, which probably doesn't really align with their goals, but you really need that funding. So there's that barrier on, okay, my proposal wasn't funded because this is not what they want, right? But that is actually you targeting the real people, the environment, they matter, so stuff like that. So I guess how do we kind of breach that gap?
Well, I think, in the first place you bridge it is by knowing the donor. If you go to SARE, SARE's all about environmental issues, right? SARE is super involved with sustainable agriculture. That's in the title, right, of the program. So that's a place you go for if you want to work on things that are related to the environment and so on. SARE is an excellent source. On the other hand, if you want to work on improving, say, increasing the market for some crop or something, that might be quite different. So you have to know the donor. You really have to know what they want, because you're just never going to succeed if you are writing proposals that do not fit with the donor's goals and objectives. So you really know a lot about the donor. You got to know a lot about the donor, and you really have to take it into consideration. I like SARE, obviously, because I'm very interested in environmental issues and social issues, by the way. So since I'm very interested in those two things, I have been very comfortable working with SARE for many years. I've worked with the Beginning Farmer program in USDA because I'm very interested in beginning farmers and expanding the farm population instead of decreasing it. So a lot of that just has to do with doing your homework and really knowing what these different programs want to achieve. It's kind of not much use trying to write a proposal for an organization that just doesn't share your ideas. It not interested in funding what you want to get done. So that's why I think people really need to spend more time looking at the donor and what the donor wants. And if what the donor wants is not relevant for you, don't go with that donor. Go somewhere else.
Okay, thank you. Makes sense.
Yeah, it does. It's kind of hard news, but true. Any other comments or questions? Brian, do you have anything you'd like to pull out of the training last week that strikes you as particularly important for this, for folks right now?
Not at this time, but I am looking for that link and I will send that out. And I think it would be good to review that training as well with this one.
Yeah.
And then I did start recording this training, so I will send this one out as well.
Okay, and I want to take a look, I want to have a look at this one. This is the short version, folks. I got it, oops, you can't see it, right? Gotta share the screen, Your screen too, good. Just gonna move this over here. Who cares? So here's this is the body of the proposal. This is not all of it. This is an abbreviated form that we put together just so that you could see it, but who can apply? And here's the vision and mission of Southern SARE. This is really important. So looking at this part of the proposal is very, very critical. So in this case, when you look at this one, right, for Southern SARE, so here's an example. Proposed projects must focus on Southern SARE's objectives, right? And it comes out of the US Congress, the definition of sustainable agriculture. So you don't get to change that. That's been already laid out, right? And it says it's the site specific, an integrated system of plant and animal production that's site specific. So you have to really read these things in detail. If you look at Southern SARE's vision and mission, it's enduring American agriculture of the highest quality, is profitable, protects the nation's land and water, and is a force for a rewarding way of life for farmers and ranchers whose quality of products and operations sustain their communities and society. And Southern SARE's mission is to advance to the whole of American agriculture innovations that improve profitability, stewardship, and quality of life. So they're being really explicit. And if you write a proposal for SARE, you must address those things. Otherwise, you don't stand a chance. That's what SARE does and wants to do. So they have then these specific, SARE has 6 specific program objectives. So it's important for you to look at those because those are going to feed into your objectives. You should reflect some, at least 1 or 2 of these. Objectives should be strongly reflected in your proposal. High priorities for you. And then we have here some links that give you more information about this grant and about Southern SARE. So I think taking a look at this would be very, very helpful to you and looking at all of those 3. Any questions about these? Yeah, perseverance.
I have a question that is actually on the side of advice also on how to write, because on key 7, success means change, and one of the things that you emphasize is how that it should increase income per acre, for example. In some cases, when we talk sustainability and environment right now, some of the environmental benefits are still not really quantified. And we really at some point don't know how to put a cost to that. How do we go about making that clear? I have an idea, but I really would like your advice on how do we convince a donor that yes, this is not necessarily about cost, but it is about the environment and trying to put that environmental cost in an explicit but not necessarily tangible way.
Yeah, I understand you. I understand what you're saying. It does become quite difficult. What I like to do is to talk about long-term versus intermediate goals and objectives, and show how you can build over time to achieve bigger goals, right? And I think that that is something that really matters to donors, that when they can see that you have thought through what some of the weaknesses are going to be in your program, and you know that. And you say, well, we're going to extend this beyond time. And sometimes I've actually said in grant proposals, I regard this as a starter grant. This is a start on a project, using a project to start a longer term research program or extension program. And it's okay to say that, to say this is step one. We know that. That way you're not, sort of trying to deceive people into the idea that you're going to solve this long-standing problem with one grant. Probably not going to happen. Does that help?
It helps a lot. Thank you. Yeah, it makes total sense because it's been a challenge, but to write that because it's the goal. I think I always say I would like to see farmers being able to be paid for their improved management practices, but we still don't have a system in place that includes that for farmers. So you improve soil health, but not necessarily an income, but nobody pays you for that management practices that improved your farm sustainability. So it's kind of difficult word. Yes.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yep. And I should have one more document here, but I don't. Anyway, I think it doesn't matter much, but so other questions or comments? Let's see if I can find this other thing. Probably not. Nope. I can send it out. There's a longer version of the SARE program. I would encourage you to go online and find it. Just go to Southern SARE, like it was one word, southernsare.org. Put it here. If you go to southernsare.org, you'll find all of the grants there, and the student grants, of course, are open right now. So you can find every one of these, but the student grants are there right now. Thank you, Dara. There you go. And student grants. So take a look those up and read them carefully. It's kind of a disaster when people just skim through the proposal, the instructions for the proposal. It's like, oh boy, this person didn't even bother to really read them. The other thing I want to sort of alert you about is that the selection process in SARE is completed by the farmer group of largely farmers who are part of the SARE overall management board, the overall managers of the program at the large scale, right? So you have to remember who you're writing to, and you are writing to farmers and other people who are very, very knowledgeable about sustainable agriculture because they've been working with this organization for a long time. So they do know what they're talking about, and you really have to make sure that you understand the language of the people you're talking to. So, yeah. I see a thumb up there, and I'm not sure what the thumb is for. Anything else? Any other questions, comments? The other thing I will tell you is that Brian and I are quite willing, and when we have the time, which is usually we can squeeze it out, we are quite willing to review what you're writing and take a look at it and tell you if we see some things that look like they're way off base and that sort of thing. Not detail stuff, not correcting every paragraph or something, but looking overall at what you've proposed in your proposal, right? Doesn't bother us to take the time to look at those at all.
Thank you. That
Yeah.
would be good.
Especially, I tell you, it's writing a grant proposal is not easy. You know, to say the least. Anybody else? Any other questions or comments? Guess not.
Hey, Mickey, good morning.
Pardon?
And could I share with everyone the presentation that Candace made, who's the grant manager for this program?
We wanted to send it out to everybody.
Ah, okay,
Yes,
perfect.
we did. We wanted to do that.
Okay. And you have access to it already, yes?
Yeah, you have it, don't you, Brian?
I don't have access, and actually Candace is out until I think the 18th. So if you're able to share it, that would be helpful.
Oh, okay. So I'll just email it to you all.
Yeah, sounds good.
Perfect.
Anything else? See, this must have been a good meeting. I know it's a good meeting because my cat has gone to sleep. That means she feels very happy and comfortable. Yes, that's exactly the way my cat feels. Okay, I guess we're through. Brian, want to shut us down?
Yes, I will. I'm gonna turn off the recording.